This period of 09 through 21, easy period, easy to get money. So most bankruptcies don't occur because you have a business and it loses money, goes away. It occurs because a business borrows money, times get tough, and when it goes to refinance that loan, nobody ever repays their debts. They just refinance it. And when they go to the bank to refinance it, the bank says, you're not as good a credit as you used to be, or we don't have as much money to lend as we used to have, or our standards are higher. So it really comes from most bankruptcies or defaults are associated with a maturity which is unmet. And I think that when you go through a period when it's super easy to raise money for any purpose or no purpose, and you go into a period when it's difficult to raise money even for a good purpose, clearly many more companies are going to founder.
So is it your expectation that over the next 2 or 3 years you'll see more defaults in buyouts or real estate? It's often thought that commercial real estate in big cities is going to have a lot of defaults in the debt.
Yes, well, I think the long-term average default rate on high yield bonds, for example, we didn't have any years in the last 15 at 4%. It was a very low period. In the coming years, there will be some. I say, you found a company to buy, you went to the bank, they said, we'll lend you $800 million at 5%. Now the loan is up for renewal, you go in, they say, fine, we'll lend you $500 million at 8%. So you have less money and your cost of capital is higher, and you have a $300 million hole that you can't fill.
You don't make predictions, but what about the Fed lowering interest rates? Are you willing to think the Fed will do that next year, or you think that's too much of a prediction?
No, I do think that today's Fed funds rate of 5.25 to 5.5 is a restrictive measure designed to cool off the economy and inflation. And when the inflation abates, as it seems to be in the process, I think that the Fed funds rate will settle out lower than it is today.
So if the President of the United States called you and said, you know, you really know a lot about markets and so forth, why don't you come in the government and serve the government in a senior position? Would you ever want to go in the government?
I think I would do it, as a civic duty. I would imagine that having had a beautiful little company like ours and running it in partnership with Bruce and doing what we want, to go into government and not be able to do what you want or think is right, I think would be important contribution maybe, but probably frustrating.
So for somebody that's a young person watching this, and he or she says, I want to be the next Howard Marks, I want to be an investment professional, what do you recommend? Is it reading a lot, being good with numbers, working hard? What do you do to, and why should somebody want to be an investment professional? Why not go into climate change work or something like that?
Well, I wouldn't tell anybody what they should do. What I would say is this: investing is a fascinating field because there are so many variables that have to be juggled and so many uncertainties that have to be dealt with. It's stimulating. The solutions are never static. Yesterday's solution will not work tomorrow. It keeps you on your toes. On the other hand, because of the imprecision, you fail a lot. And, Warren Buffett always talks about Ted Williams, who batted 400. It means 60% of the time he was out at the plate. The great investors are right 60%, 70%, maybe 80% of the time. If you're the kind of person who has to be right all the time, you shouldn't be in investing.
So if somebody said to you, what is the most common investment mistake that the average person makes, what would you say?
I think can I do two?
Sure.
Number one is that people believe in the ability to predict the future. Either their ability or others that they can identify. And in general, I agree with John Kenneth Galbraith, who said there are two kinds of forecasters, the ones who don't know and the ones who don't know they don't know. So I think that the average person has to learn that they don't know what the future holds, and nobody else does either. The other thing is people believe that there's kind of a direct and mechanical linkage. If a company has a good event, the securities do well. If they have a bad event like earnings, securities do poorly. But that's not the case, because there's a intermediate step, which is people's reaction. So it's not just whether the event was positive, it's how people reacted to the event that determines the impact on the security prices, and that's two different things. So you can't forget the psychological and human factor.
So has anybody been a mentor to you or given you investment advice, or what's the best investment advice you've ever received?
You know, I received snippets from hanging around with smart people. I didn't have a single mentor. I read a lot, and I was fortunate to associate with people who were generous with their knowledge and shared it with me, and that's why I write the memos, to share it with others.
Now, do people come up to you at cocktail parties and say, well, you're a famous investor, I've got $100,000, what should I do with it? Or what do you tell people about what they should do with their money when they just ask you for a free advice?
Well, the main thing I do is I say that's kind of like going to a doctor and saying, do you have any good medicines? What is the condition you're trying to treat? Do you have more money than you need or less? Are you going to live a long time or a short time? Do you have dependents? What are their needs? Do you have what it takes viscerally to live with ups and downs, or not? If it's going to make you miserable, you shouldn't do it. I think that investments have to be appropriate for the individual. But you know, when the markets are doing well, or when we're doing well, then people have that cocktail party conversation. When the markets are doing poorly, I just stand in the corner.